everybody, and welcome to the Lucky Ones podcast. I'm your host, Lucky Wood, and tonight we have a very amazing special episode because we're gonna talk a little bit about the history and some of the past, and just some fun facts about arm wrestling with a man who needs no introduction if you know the sport, but nobody knows the sport quite like he knows the sport. And so we're super excited to have Eric Roussin on. And thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about how you got into arm wrestling.
So like many people, I used to arm wrestle as a kid in high school, just for fun. And I knew I was good at it. I had a knack for it, even though I didn't really have any technique. I was pretty good. And then luckily, I found out that there was a tournament, a pretty big tournament in town locally. So I went there. I was only 17. I didn't actually compete that time, but I spoke to the organizer and I watched it, and he invited me out to practice, and that's sort of how I got into it. So yeah, I've been arm wrestling competitively since '96,
Oh, wow.
and then I would say I'm retired from competition, maybe not permanently, but I stopped 2 years ago, 2022.
Gotcha. So a little hiatus until someone
Yeah,
brings it back in.
yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
I mean, for my main reason is after the years of wear and tear, it was starting to bug my elbows a little bit too much. And because, as you know, I do a lot of, I also compete in grip sport contests, so grip strength contests, and
Right?
I don't have the same level of pain or really any pain doing that. So I'm riding that wave for now, and then maybe when I become a grandmaster, I'll come back to arm wrestling a bit.
There you go. There you
Yeah,
go. We'll have so many people in the class when you're over there in the Grandmasters.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, with grip strength, tell us a little bit about that. I know you had a pretty big event here, or well, not here, but up in Canada not too long ago.
Yeah. So luckily, I still continue to host arm wrestling. For arm wrestling, I just ran the Auto Open, which is basically it's the biggest tournament in North America in terms of entries.
Right?
We had 734 entries this year. So it was a big weekend, running 5 tables, nonstop, 6 hours on Saturday, 6 hours on Sunday. Great event. So I'm happy that continues to be a success. And yeah, I do compete and host a lot of grip strength contests. This year, I held the North American Championships here in Ottawa, and we had most of the top competitors from North America. So it was another great contest. So I'm lucky. I'm fortunate to have been involved in both sports for so long. I have a pretty good network and a lot of support and a lot of friends. So it's possible to do these events, and they're generally very well attended.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What would you say is like the biggest difference between like the two, like as far as like the people, or are they pretty much like the same type of people that compete?
Um, Similar. I mean, arm wrestling, it's a one-on-one. Nothing really beats the feeling of winning an arm wrestling match. It's just, it's a little different because grip strength is it's a weightlifting competition for the most part. It's you against the weight, and you hope to lift more than everyone else.
Right.
But arm wrestling, you know, it's the feeling is different. So there's a lot more stress in arm wrestling, like leading up to a tournament, and there's a lot more that can go wrong, right? Or not go wrong, but there are a lot more surprises because you don't if you don't know your opponents, you don't know what technique they're going to use or what technique you should use.
Right.
There's always a chance that you'll miss the go. A referee could make a bad call. There's a lot of stressors in an arm wrestling tournament that
Right.
I feel are less common in a strength contest. So for that, but in terms of the competitors, I mean, I have a fair number of competitors who have done both, at least in the area.
Right.
I would just think it's maybe a less of a lower stress sport. But
Okay.
but yeah, no, people who are good in arm wrestling tend to be pretty good in grip as well, right? It goes hand in hand because obviously a strong hand is great for both sports. So yeah.
Right. No, definitely. Do you have people who travel further for one or the other?
Um, well, in grip, especially if you want to go to the big contest in North America, you have to be willing to travel. Because there's only a handful of promoters really organizing contests. There's maybe, well, now there's probably maybe 15 promoters across North America who host contests.
Oh wow.
As opposed to arm wrestling, where I'm sure there's more than 100 right now. But
Right. There's
but
so many, it's ridiculous.
yeah, so and I like to go to the big grip contests. So I go to the Arnold every year. I go to the I went to the Shaw Classic last year. I went to this year, I should say. I go. So if you're willing to travel, sorry, if you want to compete at the top level, you definitely have to travel. But
Right.
that's part of the fun of these sports, right? So
Right.
yeah.
What's the farthest anybody's ever come to for the Ottawa Classic or for your grip strength?
So for the Ottawa Open this year I had people coming from Alberta, so pretty much the other end of the country. For the Ottawa Open. Actually, that's not true. Pascal Girard from Switzerland was in town. He didn't come specifically for this tournament, but he was in Ontario and he decided to come. So he would be the
That
furthest.
counts.
Yeah, that'd be the furthest traveled. Yeah,
Wow, that's
yeah,
so cool.
yeah. And then in terms of coming to Ottawa for grip, nothing outside North America, but I've traveled to like Russia twice before for the Worlds. So, yeah, it's
How'd you do
a lot
at
of fun.
Worlds?
I won gold medals both times, so I can't complain.
So, so really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How about for arm wrestling? Did you ever attend Worlds for arm wrestling?
I never competed at Worlds, so I would say I made it to like a national level in arm wrestling. Like I've won 3 national titles. I made it to the WOW. Back in the years where the WAL had the tournaments, I
Yeah.
made it to the finals the final tournament every year. So and then I placed top 8 a couple of times. So I did qualify to go to Worlds in arm wrestling a couple of times, but I never went. It was at that time I was younger, and a week that's a week-long commitment, right? So vacation and time away from family and time away from work. So it was never too easy to do. Like all of these grip contests I go to, they're always just on the weekend, so it's a lot easier to fly in on the Friday and leave on the Monday. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Very cool.
yeah.
What's up, Yak? Welcome in. So that's awesome. And then so as far as your family goes, do you have any arm wrestlers or grip? I know you mentioned hockey, like all good Canadians. Uh,
Yeah. So all 4 of my kids have competed in arm wrestling. So especially when they were really young. I only have one who's still active in it. But they've all 3 of them have won that Canadian national titles. So they had their fun, and there's where I live in Eastern Ontario, there's a lot of kids tournaments. So it's really great spot if you're a kid and you want to arm wrestle, and it's in the high schools now, and it's really really good. So I had all 4 of my kids have dabbled in it.
right.
But as they get older, they have different interests. So not so much anymore, but it was a lot of fun. You have kids as well, right? Have they? Oh, you
Mm-mm.
don't? Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Well, when you do have, when I would go to tournaments with my kids, it's a lot more fun or stressful as compared to just for myself competing. I'm more excited to watch my kids than me myself. So yeah,
Definitely. Oh no, I get more excited when I watch my friends compete. So
yeah, yeah,
I can only imagine that triples when they're,
yeah,
your spawn, if you will.
yeah,
Or you can embarrass them, because I think my kids are embarrassed when I'm yelling really loud, like, he'll just be
yeah.
quiet, and I'm like, straight to the pad. And then he just stopped and looked at me, and everybody looked at me, and I'm just like, come on, I say straight to the pad.
Gotta
Yeah,
commit, gotta commit.
yeah. Be the embarrassing parent who cheers them on.
Well, awesome. Well, we um we have a lot of ladies that come on and talk about their experience here in arm wrestling, but being a teacher, I got super excited to have you on just to kind of talk a little bit about some of the stuff of the past, because I love hearing, perspectives, but it's nice to get like facts and stories and history that maybe, other people don't necessarily know about our sport.
Right.
So for me, like this was like, sweet, let's do a PBS educational hour. And of course your name popped up um from my coach, Mike Nance, who was just like, you have to have him on if you want to ever do so, learn more about the history of our sport and stuff.
Right.
I was like, You got it. Sounds like a deal. So we really appreciate your time and being willing to come and uh
Yeah,
spend share some knowledge with us.
right. Well,
So
where do you want to start?
let's just start let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's go all the way back. Tell us what you know about the beginning of arm wrestling and how it originated.
So so I've researched a lot on arm wrestling, and from what I can tell, it's very likely to have developed independently in different parts of the world. Um, the three areas that I know arm wrestling goes back at least several hundred years: Hawaii, Japan, and French Canadian culture. Um, at least several hundred years in all those areas. It's possible similar type of sports or movements happen elsewhere, but that's where I can, at least based on my research, I'm very confident that it did exist there. So there's this popular myth that it was back in the Egyptian times that there was arm wrestling, and that's, in my opinion, based on a misinterpretation of some hieroglyphs in Egypt, where if you look at them, it looks a lot more like just people who are dancing. So I think somebody at one point said they're arm wrestling, but if you look at the rest, it really seems unlikely, or at least I'm not convinced. So I'm not prepared to say that it dates back to Egyptian times, but at least to those three areas of the world. Now, in North America, or in the U.S., there was very little that was maybe in terms of organized arm wrestling, like actual tournaments and rules.
Right.
The earliest I found is in the Montreal area of Canada, so actually not too far from where I live. Just around the turn of the century, so right around 1900, they started establishing rules and having tournaments, and they actually did super matches. So them, it was all either 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5s. So it wasn't double elimination tournaments. It was sometimes it was a tournament spread over several nights, but every competitor would face off 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5, and then the winner would get eliminated, and then the winners would face each other. So the first national champion, according to my research, was crowned in 1905. So the first was a Canadian national championship back in 1905. I haven't found anything similar in any other country. Now, I don't speak every language, so I don't know.
Right,
But based on what I found some national level tournaments in Brazil in the 1940s, Sweden possibly in the 1930s. And in the U.S., the earliest is stuff that happened in Petaluma, where the World's Wrist Wrestling Championship. So if you're familiar, and that's really the birth of arm wrestling as we know today. Is almost, we can all trace it back to being inspired or by Petaluma. So Petaluma, small town in California, they started having arm wrestling matches in a local bar in the mid 1950s. And then people liked it, so they made it an annual thing. And then the first year it was just 2 guys having a match. Right. And then the next year there was like 4 or 5 guys competing. The year after that, it kept getting bigger and bigger. So that by the early 1960s, it was called like the Northern California tournament, or maybe the California State tournament. It was that big. And then it was too big for the bar. And then they decided, so Bill Sobranis was one of the guys behind this. He was a writer for the local newspaper, and he would talk about wrist wrestling, and really promote the contest, the tournament. And he was well connected in the media, so surrounding cities would hear about it, and they would talk about it, and it would draw more and more people. Another person who lived in Petaluma at the time, Dave Devoto, who recently passed away, but he is. You asked about in some of the emails or the message you sent me earlier, who's sort of the godfather. I would say he might be what I would consider the godfather, because he was one of the guys to convince Bill, listen, this tournament, we got something on our hands here. Let's move it out of the bar. Let's put it in a bigger spot, bigger venue, and let's call it a world championship. And they did some research and they didn't find any other organizations or anyone else doing this, so they just called it a world championship. And they had 50 people that first year, only one weight class, only right hand, single elimination. So tournaments back then were tough, right?
Right, right.
And then that was covered in the newspapers. And then by the end of the decade, by late 1960s, this is the deal that Dave, that really make arm wrestling take off, is he got a deal with ABC, Wide World of Sports, to broadcast that tournament on Wide World of Sports. And that's where everyone learned that arm wrestling is a sport, because that was broadcast in houses all around North America. Apparently, they said like 35 million people saw arm wrestling for the first time in those years. And they realized, oh, like a lot of people knew the movement, or they thought it was a game. They didn't realize there were tournaments.
Right.
And then that's where everyone, like all of the other promoters or arm wrestlers who came after that, can all trace all the way back to Petaluma as an inspiration, or somebody went to Petaluma. So really, that's the birth of organized arm wrestling in North America. So, and wrist wrestling, the reason they did wrist wrestling, for viewers who don't know, wrist wrestling is arm wrestling, but your offhand, instead of grabbing the peg, you're clasping your opponent's hand underneath your arms, in the middle. So the reason they did that is because the guy who was in Petaluma and who was arm wrestling, that's just what that's the version he knew how to do. So because that's what he knew, when they made rules and they made the table, they just went with wrist wrestling. And because that's what was on TV, a lot of the early organizations that formed like in the early 1970s, initially they were doing wrist wrestling. But along the way, some people like started experimenting, there's probably a better way, and they started experimenting with the hand peg. So a couple of different organizations came up with a hand peg table, and basically everyone liked it. So that's what became the norm. And when wrist wrestling went off, it went on TV for 16 years. And the last tournament that aired was 1984. And after that, it quickly disappeared. They still kept doing wrist wrestling in Petaluma until the late 80s, but even in the late 80s, I think it's 89 is when they finally switched to a peg table. And from then on, it was arm wrestling. They still called it wrist wrestling because that's the event. Right. But from then on, it was just arm wrestling, stand-up arm wrestling. Now, I don't know if you know this, there's still an organization that runs wrist wrestling tournaments in the Midwest. It's sort of underground. It's called the World National Wrist Wrestling Association. It's all local type tournaments. Right. But as far as I know, they're the only ones who are keeping wrist wrestling alive, because it is never, I've never actually tried it like on a real table. Yeah, so I think that's
what kind of table do they use for wrist wrestling?
So in the Petaluma days, they had like a slot, sort of like a horseshoe shaped slot, so where you place your elbow. So it's similar to a pad, but more of a spot where you can't get out of there. Okay. And then, but the rest of the table is just a flat surface. It's a square, sort of like a freedom table. If you've seen the Devin Larratt's freedom table. Gotcha. And the wrist wrestling organization that still exists, I think, is pretty much just a flat surface. It's really basic.
Okay.
I think we should try it out. Maybe you should send us the link and we'll go find them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you guys live in that area, right? Yeah. So in the Midwestern states, Wisconsin, I don't remember which other states, but in that area, there still are some small tournaments.
Oh, that's not bad. No, I go to the Midwest to visit. I'm from the Midwest. I'm out in Virginia now, but I go back there to visit people. So, yeah, no, that'd be really cool to swing by and see for sure.
Yeah.
Have you ever met Dave Devoto?
Pardon?
Did you get to meet Dave Devoto?
I not in person. I've been in the same room, but this was many years ago, so I never, got a chance to speak to him in person. But I have had phone calls with him and a lot of email correspondence, so I have at least been able to communicate with him. Yeah, very nice man, and it's hard to had he not made that deal, and I don't know how we had those connections with ABC, but who knows where the sport would be? Because, like I said, everything that exists now can trace its inspiration back to that series of events.
So then we shifted now to where we had like the WAL, the wall or whatnot, and all that stuff, and now we've shifted kind of to where the World American Federation is now like all over. So tell us a little bit about that and how that took off.
The World Arm Wrestling Federation? Yeah. So the guy who started the World Arm Wrestling Federation by the name of Bob O'Leary, Scranton, Pennsylvania. So he is also a guy who saw Petaluma and he saw it on TV, and he started hosting tournaments at his local YMCA in 1970. And he really liked the sport, and he started getting organized very quick. So I think in 71, he held like a North American arm wrestling championship. And then he was hosting like an East Coast World Championship. Eventually, they actually called it the World Arm Wrestling Federation in 1976. He assembled a few people, like-minded people. Let's form this federation. Initially, it was just Americans. Soon after, he made contact with someone in India and someone in Canada, right around 77. And I think that's why we hear 1977 as the birth year of that federation. But what they call the first true worlds was in 1979 in Canada, because that was the first world championship that attracted people from outside of North America, basically. There was only Canada, US, India, and Brazil, but 1979, and then, well, it really, the first few years, it grew gradually, but it really took off in the 1990s when the sport was introduced to the Eastern Bloc. So, so an American contingent was invited to Russia in 1989 to basically demonstrate arm wrestling. And so that was really the introduction to Russians. And they had a series of super matches between the American pullers and the Russians. And the Russians, they had like Olympic weightlifters, they had Olympic shot putters, but no one knew arm wrestling. They're just strong guys. And although the matches were exhibition matches, it was completely lopsided. Like the American pullers completely dominated. But it really, I think, opened their eyes to like, there's something to this, because they knew they were strong athletes, but they didn't know anything about arm wrestling. So we sort of have that group to blame for introducing arm wrestling to the Eastern Bloc, because now, as you know, they're quite dominant.
Right.
But yeah, in the 90s, it really, like the number of countries in the World Arm Wrestling Championships around 1990, it may have been 15, 18, 20. By 10 years later, we were in the almost 40, and now, it's a lot, so it's, yeah, the WAF, I know there have been a couple of splits over the year with the IFA and WAF. Right. More recently. WAF is still the bigger one, the higher caliber one. It's very unfortunate of what's going on, but yeah, it's yeah, but that organization's been around for 45 years now, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that, it's just one of those things where everybody's like kind of looking, being like, why can't we all get along? Yeah. And you don't quite know everything all the time either. So
yeah,
know what people want to tell you.
Right. Exactly.
Yep. So we try to stay neutral here. We're just like, pull where you want.
Yeah.
Live your life.
Yeah, that's where we're lucky here in Canada. Our national body is unaffiliated, so we only have one nationals. Everyone goes, and then you can go to IFA, or you can try and do the route for go to the WAF. But we're very lucky that sort of our national body is declared itself neutral.
Right.
Yeah.
No, definitely. Yeah. Because like you said, there's going to be different talents at each one, because you don't know who's going to be where.
Right.
As a puller, you always try to grip up with as many different types of other pullers as possible.
Right.
Very cool. Well, tell us a little bit about the first females in arm wrestling.
Yeah. So if I go back to the pedal, so I didn't find in my research for like in the old days, like in Canada or Hawaii or Japan. I didn't really find much for females arm wrestling, but in Petaluma in 1964, they decided first time ever we're gonna have a women's division, open class, open weight, one single elimination, and they only had I think 4 women try that first year, and a woman by the name of Barbara Sappington, who wasn't an athlete, but she was just worked at somewhere locally, and she showed up and she won. So she was the first world champion, and she won the first couple of years. But it was very low attendance because this is before the televised days. This is still just in the newspaper.
Right.
It wasn't until about 67 where when someone became sort of a dominant puller. Her name was Mickey Novus. She was a bigger lady, and she won 3 years in a row, 67, 68, 69. And she was on that first televised version, but she didn't like the way they portrayed her or filmed her, I guess. So she didn't come back. Like, even though she won, I'm like, you're the world champion. I thought I'd want to go back, but she was, I guess, uncomfortable with how it was presented.
Right.
So she never returned. It's unfortunate because she was a great arm wrestler.
Yeah.
So in the 70s, the 70s is really when the sport went from completely unknown to quite. By the end of the 70s, there were several major organizations, several big organizations, many events on TV. Like the 70s was I call that the golden era for arm wrestling because it went from nothing to all of a sudden on TV and a lot of people doing it. And that brought a lot of women into it. It was still only one weight class until the mid 70s. And then at some point in Petaluma, once again, sort of a bigger lady came and she just demolished everyone. And they're like, okay, we're going to have at least 2 weight classes. so to keep everyone happy. So then they started adding another class. But all that TV coverage from Petaluma, the World Professional Arm Wrestling Association, which was basically the biggest competitor, and they were doing tournaments across North America, and they had their own world championships, and that's arm wrestling on a peg table. The TV just brought people into the sport. So there was actually quite a few women competing. There was never very many weight classes, usually only 2. And everything was right-handed. Almost everything was right-handed. There was very, very little left-handed arm wrestling until the 90s. There was some in the 80s, but really not much. And even in the 90s, if there were 6 right-hand classes, there may have been 2 or 3 left-hand classes. It's only in the 2000s that sort of left started mirroring the right hand, which is great. I mean, I'm right-handed, but I think I've had more success left-handed over the years. So it's nice to be able to compete just as much, on the same equal footing, right? Both arms, so twice as much pulling.
Definitely.
Yeah, but sort of, I guess the next woman who really dominated, I'd say, was Pam Carter. She was out of Nevada, and she was the number 1 woman open weight from 1979 to about 1984. Oh, wow. And then, have you heard of Dot Jones?
Of course.
So Dot Jones came on the scene in 83, and she met up with Pam at Petaluma and beat her in 84, and then proceeded to dominate the sport for a dozen years. Like in those 12 years, Dot competed in all the big tournaments, and her only losses were at Over the Top. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah.
So Over the Top is the big tournament that they held in conjunction with the Sylvester Stallone movie.
Right.
And unfortunately for Dot, that was the one tournament she didn't win, and she was defeated by a Quebec puller by the name of Leanne Dufresne. And that was her only loss, but it just sucks that it was at the biggest tournament ever.
Exactly.
And it was great for Leanne. She was 20 years old, and she won, the big show. So, yeah. So Dot was really.
What was the size comparison between Dot and?
So Dot was like 6'4" and like 250 or 260. She was a big person. And Leanne was she's definitely under 6 feet. I don't know exactly how tall she was. I would have guessed at that time she was closer to 200.
Okay.
But she was not small, but she was nothing compared to. And she was a presser. She managed to press Dot. Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched, like the fuzzy, 8-track tape quality pulling of Dot
Right.
on YouTube thing, and it's just like I could not imagine gripping up with her, like,
Yeah.
I mean it's the equivalent of, Gabby and Barbara and Sarah Wilson and
Yeah.
just
And,
just these ladies that just blow right through people.
it's unfortunate that Dot was never really challenged, right? Aside from that one tournament, she didn't. She was just naturally super strong. That she never had she been competing in this era, she would have probably been forced to train more or forced. She just never. It's like Cleve Dean in his early days. He was above everyone, right? He's just a big, huge, strong man, and no one really never really had to learn how to pull better than he needed to because he was already the best. So
Right.
yeah.
Definitely. So who are some of the greatest arm wrestlers in history, and who would you say is like the most successful or is the most successful right now?
So I mean, I want to speak more about the women. For the men, I mean, John Brzenk, no one's ever going to be able to match what he's accomplished in terms of, there's a lot that goes into that. He dominated the sport from a very young age for almost 40 years, but the sport was much smaller, right? It was a North American sport in the time where he won a lot of his awards, but it doesn't matter. He was competing consistently a dozen plus times a year, all the big tournaments and winning every time. Not every time. He wasn't like he was, in my opinion, and I think most would agree. It's not like even at his best, he wouldn't have beat Levan. Levan is a different creature. But Levan competes twice a year, once or twice a year. John Brzenk competed. He has more than 500 major titles, so it's, and I'm not just, these are all money titles. These are all things that were very prestigious and hard to win.
Right.
So I don't think anyone will ever match his sort of resume. And of those 40 years, the vast majority, he was the best in his weight. But according to what my ranking, 14 of those years, he was the very best on the planet. So 14 years at the top of the mountain is impressive.
Yeah.
The sport right now, the past 5 years, I don't think it's ever been at the elite level as strong as it is. I mean, it's the people who are now. There's a lot of full-time arm wrestlers who take it extremely seriously, and the level is insane. For the women, though, it's hard to pick a single woman because there are different eras. So
Right.
you have the 80s and 90s, Dot Jones.
Right.
Also in the 90s, Vika Gabakova, a big Russian woman who also was basically undefeated for 10 plus years. And they never met. Dot and Vika never pulled, but they sort of overlapped in terms of, so that would have been interesting, but unfortunately we never got to see it. And then we get in the past 20 years, someone like Irina Makiva. Have you heard of her?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Irina Makiva, for most of the 2010s, she was the number one right-hander. And she wasn't even that. She wasn't like a Dot Jones. I think she was 70 kilo, right? She wasn't a huge lady.
Right.
So it's unbelievable, and she was ahead of everyone. I know she's sort of retired from the sport, but yeah, those but even though they may have been in different weight classes, Gabriela Vasconcelos, Egle, Barbara in recent years, and Heidi Anderson, Sarah Backman, all these women have been. If you look at the past 20 years, it's still the same women who are at the Worlds. Some of these women have been winning for like 20 years in a row, like not exactly, but virtually.
Sure.
It's just so impressive because you don't see that many on the men's side who dominate for that many years, So
Right.
it is very impressive. And what was fun? Did you ever hear about the World Challenge organized by Heidi Anderson? This is about
People talked about it, yeah.
yeah.
who talked about Mullen talked about it.
Yes.
He was here on the show.
So right around 2009, 2010, 2011, those years, Heidi Anderson, who was basically one of the most popular athletes in Sweden, and she was the best, like arm wrestling at her weight class. She really was dominant. She started hosting an invitational women's only tournament, and there was only a few weight classes, and then everyone would face off. Anyone who wanted to win the overall to be crowned the best lady arm wrestler in the planet. And those tournaments were awesome because they would get them. All the top women would go. Irina would go, Egla would go, Heidi would go, Sarah would go. So I don't know why it only lasted 3 or 4 years. I'm assuming sponsorship or whatever, but it's too bad that we don't. Well, we have the super matches through King of the Table and East versus West, but that was really a special tournament because it was really, this is the women's pinnacle arm wrestling tournament. So I would love to see that come back. I do think it's very exciting what I see, the round robins that are the women's invitational round robins in the States. Those are really cool. Like those, I hope there's more of that because it's fun. Yeah. It's fun to have your showcase, So
definitely. Yeah. The left hand will be in April of 2025. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Sarah Wilson will be down here for that, and then Peyton Pickering is in the 154 class. So we have some North Americans coming down to join us. So that'll be I'm excited to hang out with them and all that. So that'll be good. And I know Sarah Collins, she did, I think was it 2 or 3, Stephanie, that she did for the all women's tournaments here
I thought it was 3.
3, yeah, I thought so too. She did 3 all women's tournaments, and like you said, just like the sponsorship and the trying to get all the ladies in one spot, it's just so hard.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would love to see something like that come back. But I appreciate people like Sarah and Heidi who put the effort into making it happen, and then and then of course with Beast Mode being willing to host and put in the promoting for that is really important.
Yeah,
definitely. So, how has arm wrestling evolved in the media? Do you think it'll ever go like even more mainstream? Because I mean, we've been like, I feel like it's kind of been like in and out as far as like ESPN or ABC Sports and all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really happy with where the elite level is at. I think it's very cool that there are now arm wrestlers who can make a living doing this, whether it's from the matches themselves or, in some of these Eastern Bloc countries, they have government sponsorship and even the YouTube route. Like I'm sure Devin makes a lot of money just from being on YouTube, right? So I think that's really cool. And what I like is that is clearly surviving because the fans are buying the pay-per-view. So it's profitable. Hopefully it remains profitable. Hopefully these things keep going. Right. In terms of will it become more mainstream? I don't know. I don't think it's a sport that will ever. Mainstream is a bit of a strong word. I feel like I have a hard time believing it'll ever be truly mainstream. I mean, there was a lot of hope after Over the Top came out. They're like, this is it. I mean, Stallone is making a huge movie. And believe it or not, the years immediately after the top were sort of down years in arm wrestling. It's as if everyone was sort of waiting for something to happen, and then nothing really did. So,
wow.
And then over the years, it's been here and there on ESPN from time to time. Game of Arms was a huge thing in terms of bringing people into the sport. World Arm Wrestling League, that was a great. At least the tournament years were really great because the tournament WL is fun because hundreds of arm wrestlers can be involved. The super matches are nice too, but it's only the very best who get to partake. And I understand from a fan perspective watching on TV, but if you're an athlete, those tournaments were amazing. They did the regional championships in 2015. So they had 3 regional championships. They had North, South, and West, I think. And the Canadians were sort of spread out in any of those regions. And they did all 3 of those tournaments the same weekend in Las Vegas at the same time. And there was like, I don't know how many are. There's hundreds and hundreds of arm wrestlers. And not only hundreds and hundreds, but hundreds and hundreds of almost all of the best North American arm wrestlers were there, right? Like Devin was there, John Brzezinski was there, like almost everyone. So it's too bad that those died off, and I don't know that they'll ever come back. But those were really 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 fun.
What uh,
Yeah,
what year was that?
that big one was 2015. But those tournaments went from 2014 to 2017. That was a really nice, really fun time to be an active arm wrestler. And but now, I mean, the huge growth is really during COVID, like the YouTube exposure, and arm wrestling's never had more pullers than ever, or fans. This is really the past 5 years when I would say we actually have fans now, like people who follow the sport who are not arm wrestlers, which is really fun to see. And like I said, I think it's great that it's at a point where it's supporting pay-per-view events, and what we're seeing right now. Hopefully, it continues to grow, but I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever see it as mainstream. At least on when we think of mainstream sports, I don't think we'll ever reach that level. But I'm fine with that. I mean, I think it's I sort of like that. It's sort of like a more underground, because when you talk to someone, you're saying you're an arm wrestler, they're very interested, right? They ask you questions. Right. Oh, what's that about? Or like, so it's not like I say, oh, I play hockey. I'm in Canada, right? Like, well, everyone plays hockey. It's not the same thing. So.
No, I like that. I can see that. I can see that. It's a good talking point. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. So who were some of the front runners that got the ladies and who showcased the ladies and gave them kind of like a big spotlight?
It's hard to say. Well, definitely for like the women's only tournament, I would say Heidi Anderson did a great job. In the early days, the World Professional Arm Wrestling Association, this was an organization formed by a guy called Steve Simons, and basically he would very much like to. He knew that it was good for the news and the media liked to hear about women arm wrestlers, because that to them that was very foreign. And so he would often get, if he's going to do an interview with the local news, he'd bring one of the top female competitors. And so, and I believe the money, he may have been one of the first to match the prize money across all the weight classes and all the men and the women. Now, there were always fewer weight classes for the women, but I think the prize money was the same, which is, how it should be. And there have been ebbs and flows. I don't know. I can think of just locally, Mark Zalepa, who was a former arm wrestler and former promoter in Ontario, and he always really did a good job of focusing on the women. And he held a few round robin women's in the past, maybe 10 years ago, invitational round robins. But unfortunately, I feel there's not that many who have really given the attention or really pushed it to the point where women's arm wrestling is truly growing. I know there are different groups now, and there's probably more women arm wrestling now than ever, but I still feel
it's still not enough, ladies. So get on the table.
Yeah. But I would love to see some promoters really focusing on the women and growing. In grip strength, there's a local promoter here. They only host women's only grip contests. And wow. What that has done is it's really grown the women's side of the sport. When we go and compete as a group, our women dominate. And when there's like a team competition, we win mostly because of the women. They get so many points. So it's really good. But I really think that's the biggest success I've seen is when like a promoter, ideally a woman, really takes it and runs with it and pushes it. Because there is interest. There are people who want to be part of this and who want to watch it and who want to encourage it. I hope it keeps growing, keeps developing.
Definitely. So what were some of the biggest differences in the beginning of arm wrestling for men and women as opposed to right now? I know we talked about how before like it was only like right hand. What are some other differences?
Well, in the 70s and 80s, sit-down arm wrestling was probably so World Arm Wrestling Championships were sit-down all the way till the early 1990s. It was sit-down. What happened is more of the professional, so the money tournaments like the Petaluma and the World Professional Arm Wrestling, that was always stand up. So eventually it sort of became recognized. Okay, stand up arm wrestling is like the pro arm wrestling, and seated is more not. There wasn't money involved, and obviously money is a pretty big factor. And money what gets on TV. So eventually, seated arm wrestling basically died out in the early '90s. There's still in Virginia, I don't know if you're aware, they still have the sit down nationals, right? They revived that a few years ago.
You're looking at the sit down national champ.
Yeah, right. I've never actually tried it. Do you like it?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I prefer sit downs actually.
Okay. Anyway, so I mean those guys are some of the guys who were involved back in the '70s. So they're the ones who revived it or keeping it alive. But really that's pretty much the only place it exists. There's very little sit down arm wrestling around the world right now. It's almost all stand up. So that's something that's definitely changed. And the rules, like anything, the rules get refined over the years. In the Petaluma years, it was completely like there's very few rules. Like you could actually get your shoulder against your hand and push down, and that was fine. So body contact was allowed. So you can imagine it was a matter of time before they got that. They changed that rule, you know. So, but the rules. So I feel, especially in recent years, aside from the Kings moving the shoulder below the table, that's sort of a more recent development.
Right.
But aside from that, I think the rules, the table dimensions haven't really changed. So yeah, not too much. It's more the depth of the sit down and that the fact that there's a lot more left hand and right hand is pretty balanced. Those are the main changes over the years.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So which rule do you think is the most controversial when it comes to athletes and organizations?
Well, I mean, the shoulder below and when to call and is it an immediate foul? I still think there's confusion about the shoulder dropping below. So I'm not, I find that's still a controversial type thing, but I don't have too many strong opinions on that. Do you have any opinion? Like, you feel there are any rules that are more controversial or?
Not, I think as there was a match here recently where somebody had brought up like the foot placement thing where you put your foot on the opposite side of the table.
Right.
And as long as you're not interfering
right.
with the person, should they really be allowed to be like, you need to take your foot down,
right.
And so I know that was kind of one that made me go, huh, because I hadn't really thought about it before because I don't put my feet up on the other side. So I would say just like, with the shoulder thing, that was the one that kind of made me go,
right.
But
the foot thing is interesting because I don't think so in Canadian arm wrestling and maybe at the Worlds, like I'm not 100% sure, but at least I know in Canada that once the match starts, you don't have to have either foot on the ground. Like you could be in the US, I know for many years you always had to have at least one foot touching.
Right.
I don't think the ref shouldn't even be looking at that. Like you should be looking at the match. So I don't think it really matters. But that's another reason that I think sit down faded away, because sit down arm wrestling, you had like basically 4 refs. Because you had refs looking just at your butt, because your butt could not come up off the chair, so you have a ref looking at that, and then the refs looking at the foot placement. So there's too many things to look at. So yeah, I can imagine 4 refs for a match. It's a lot.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
They have a hard time finding 2 refs sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, having to find 4. Hooey. But yeah, no, I think like I said, that foot one is like pretty much, and then like only because it's caused me to like lose matches that I really wanted to win is the elbow foul in a losing position isn't necessarily a restart. It counts as a loss. So
I mean, I think that's if it's an elbow foul in a losing position, should it be a loss? Like I'm not a fan of every slip going to straps, because if you can tell who's causing the slip, I know the professional, they just slip right away. But I mean, sometimes it's obvious if somebody's elbow fouling because they know they're going to lose. That I don't like them getting a restart.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, and that's just one of those things where it's just like I understand why it's a rule. I'm just not a fan
Right.
the rule.
Right.
So, how about you, Steph? You got a rule you're like, let's throw that
Mm,
one away.
I don't like the running fouls.
Who does?
Yeah. Just because of what's the reason you don't like the running fouls?
It's because you have to keep going and then you have to start over again. You have
If you
to
had the
win.
foul, if you had the foul, yeah. Okay.
You have two
Yeah.
fouls and you have this big, huge battle, and then you win, and then you still have to start over again because there was a foul.
Right. And to be honest, I've seen so many refs sort of lose count on what's going on in the running fouls. Like sometimes they lose track, right? So that's not great either. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let's just rewrite the rule book. All right, so trivia question that we have is do you know who was the first woman to beat a male puller in like a publicized
So
position?
that I don't know, but I do have an interesting story about that. So probably certainly not the first, but in my early days of competing, have you heard of Barb Schlegel? So
So,
in the 1990s, she was, the lightweight superstar. Like she really dominated in the 1990s. Um, Here in Ontario, she was at a tournament and she weighed like 135, and she entered just for fun as spur of the moment decision. She entered the men's 135-pound class, which had two national champions in it. Okay, and she beat them all.
Wow.
It was so impressive. It was so impressive to watch. Like, and the crowd was going wild because some of the final match was really, really close.
right.
But yeah, no, so that was exciting to watch. But I think it's fairly uncommon, right? I don't see too many. I think Danielle Evanson, didn't she pull a guy recently? But it's pretty rare. I don't see that too often, unless it's happening more than I'm aware of. But
Yeah, I think it is.
is it okay?
Yeah, so
You need some guys who
in
are
the
very
last 2 months alone, we had Danielle Evanson pull the 176 class out in Indiana. Sarah Bachman had a super match at her meet thing that I call it, which
okay.
she didn't appreciate that name. She thought it was funny, but she didn't appreciate the name. It was the beef brawl she did.
Okay.
And she won. And then Elizabeth Mossick pulled the 176 right hand at Texas State.
Okay. Wow.
So,
And
Okay.
Katie pulled some Oregon matches with the guys, and I
mhm,
pulled with the guys too.
yeah.
I
Wow.
got second place with the guys.
So
Wow.
yeah, and then
Congratulations. Wow.
last year for the Virginia rankings, there wasn't any ladies that showed up, so they were nice enough to put me in the 154s, and I got last place for right hand, but I ended up placing fourth out of six
Okay.
for left hand. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's one of those things where when ladies don't show up, or
Yeah.
when or if you're Danielle and you run out of competition, you gotta up your game.
I don't know. Do you have opinions on this? There just always, in my opinion, there's always been fewer women who were, when I say dedicated, I mean dedicated as in they were traveling and going to the big events, you know, for years, basically. I've seen many men do that. And I assume that it has to do with more family responsibilities, or there may
There's
be,
more freedom.
different priorities, right? But
Right.
it's I just don't know why it's always been a challenge to find women who remain dedicated to the sport for extended periods of time. Do you have any opinions on that, or
The podcast is dedicated to my
right?
opinion
Right.
on that. But yeah, so I think from what I've seen and heard in my several conversations with women from all across the country, like it definitely comes down to, like you said, family obligations, the money as
Right.
well. It's easy when they have a $2,800 payout to the top male, and then the top female comes out and she gets $200.
Right.
And
Right.
so there's that equity that is lost
Right.
when a woman who's putting her heart and soul into the gym and all that, and she doesn't reap the benefits that some of her male counterparts, especially male counterparts that she could beat, then it's not reciprocated.
Right.
So, and I know, when I talk to promoters on the same side, they're like, well, we're doing the free entries, we're doing the cash payouts, and we're still not having women show up. So it's
Yeah.
100% a catch-22. Like, we try to be very diplomatic on the podcast.
Yeah.
Like, I understand where the promoters are coming from, because especially the ones that are working hard to get women into the sport, sometimes they get slapped in their face when two women show up. But at the
Right.
same time, like, you have these bigger promotions that can't afford to pay the ladies, and they don't.
Right.
So,
I've always struggled for, and the other thing I'm sure is the weight classes, right? If there's only one weight class or two weight classes, it's not going to be ideal for everyone.
right.
And I've struggled with this even for my tournament. As big as the Ottawa Open was, I had I had three open women's classes, so three weight classes in the open division and three in the novice division, lightweight, middleweight, heavyweight. In the open division, the ones where I give the bisons. You've seen the bison sculpture?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Two of the women's classes only had two competitors, so I was left with a third place bison. Can you believe that? I couldn't find one woman to sign up to get that awesome award. So I don't know what to do. Like, there were 734 entries, and most of the women's classes had, I think the lightweight class had the most, maybe 6, and maybe the heavyweights had 5. But it's hard. It's very hard, and I don't really know what to do, because these are really nice, expensive awards, and I'm going to keep giving them out, right? But that's
Right.
one of the reasons I don't have 6 weight classes for women, because
Right.
I feel like I'd only have 1 or 2 women per class if I did that.
Right.
But I know that it's really, if you build it, they will come, but it's hard to build initially, because when you're just losing a lot of money initially. So yeah, but
Exactly.
hopefully it'll get better.
Definitely.
Yeah, but the people who do come tend to come every year, so that's good.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh no, those bisons look appealing.
Yeah.
Your girl got a passport application getting ready to get sent in, and we can do some traveling next year. So, but yeah, I think that's, and Steve Pettis said the same thing 2 years ago. He took home a truck full of women's gorillas
Oh
that
man.
didn't get claimed,
Yeah.
but I mean, he's staying diligent. And then last year it was the biggest women's class that I had ever been a part of, with 9 women.
Okay.
So, I stay with it, soldier.
Right.
Like that's all
Right.
I kind of, and same with Winter Blast. Brian Grondin, he dropped actually his weight class. He had it set at 154. And some of his 120 ladies complained, so he put
Right.
a weight class at 138, and
Right.
all of his dragons went home because they had money and dragons. And and I don't wonder if there could be some sort of either qualifier or some sort of investment in women, where rather than like having a $600 payout, you send 6 women $100 for travel, just to,
Right.
yeah. And then they can be like, okay, great, and then put that money towards gas, hotel, or whatever, and then
Right.
show up and win an award. And then even if they don't win, at least they're not out.
Yeah.
So I think
Right.
that's the one thing that I have not seen yet, that I would say, as my 2 cents. Maybe that could be something that people consider.
Right.
Consider to get ladies there.
Right.
So, but I don't have the answers.
Right.
If I did, I'd sell a book
Right.
and retire from teaching. So we talked about grip and how a lot of arm wrestlers do grip. What has been like an extracurricular that you have found that's really helped with arm wrestling for men or women? Or is there one that's specific for women and that one specific for men?
I think anything like grip training, I think, goes well with arm wrestling. I can't think of anything more, any other really better example, but I think there's nothing better for arm wrestling. There's nothing better than arm wrestling or very dedicated, specific training of specific lifts. So I don't think grip training can hurt or there's a lot of things that probably can't hurt, but I can't really think of an idea or of an extracurricular that would be significantly better than just focused arm wrestling training.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I did actually my arm wrestling specific workout today at the
Okay.
So yeah, it was a lot of the cable bands and the rubber bands and chin ups and all that jazz.
Right. Do you have my favorite, I guess, grip lift that translates well to arm wrestling? Have you ever tried using a wrist wrench?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh, hang on. It's right. I always get the two mixed up. There we go.
I just feel like the way it mimics somebody trying to open your hand, I just really love that feeling.
Right.
And it is a grip event, so we lifted just weight off the floor.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, if I think of one exercise that I would do for arm wrestling strength, that would probably be, something with a wrist wrench.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. My Mike and I do something we nicknamed running the rack. And by we, I mean I came up with it and he just ran with it. Because I name everything. But we hook it up to the cable machine and we start at the top and just cup and then we bring it down one and then just cup and we go all the way down and it really hits those bottom two fingers.
Yeah.
Bottom two pinkies of like people trying to open, like you said, open that hand up.
Yeah.
And so it's terrible. I hate it, but it has improved my forearm significantly. So, yeah, I do love / hate that implement. Well, very cool. Well, that's all the questions I had. Anything else you want to share with us as far as the history of arm wrestling that we didn't get to cover yet?
I hope women's arm wrestling continues to grow, and that we'll have. It's interesting to see Barbara, who's still very young. Is this the Barbara reign? Will she stay number one for a long time? It's gonna be fun to see. So I really like the fact that we're seeing at the top level, we get to see those top matches. That's really exciting to me. And I just hope that whatever I'm seeing right now with the round robins and the women competing with the men, I think that's really cool. You need some secure guys to do that, to be willing to do that. So,
Oh, definitely.
So hats off to them.
Definitely.
But no, I don't really have any more things to say. But I will say, arm wrestling has never been stronger or sort of more. Like I said, this is the first era where we have fans, which is a huge thing. And so I think that's hopefully Engen and King of the Table and all that, they can keep going, and everyone else, all the other organizations who are doing these similar things can hopefully everyone will rise and we'll keep this wave going.
Definitely. So what's next for you? What can we show up for? What can we promote? What can we enjoy?
Well, the Ottawa Open, I only do one tournament a year, but that's November 14, 15 next year. Yeah, okay. 14, 15. That's the next big one in Ottawa. Awesome. If you want to go to the biggest event in North America, that's probably still going to be it. So, and grip. Luckily, I'll be competing at the Arnold Classic in the grip. So hopefully I'll be able to go watch some of the arm wrestling because I'm happy to hear that arm wrestling is coming back, and that's really cool. And then nothing I'm organizing. I'm going to the LA Fit Expo for a big grip contest at the end of January. But in terms of what I'm organizing, nothing planned until.
You have to meet up.
I think I'm gonna do that one.
Which one?
The LA Fit Expo.
Oh, the LA Fit Expo. Cool.
Well, I'm gonna do Iron Wars at CT Fletcher's gym.
Okay.
And then I'm going to the expo. And if they don't have arm wrestling or strict curl, well, they're probably gonna have arm wrestling. I was thinking about doing strict curl, but I was very much thinking about doing the grip. I was like, is that for sure on? They're doing that one.
The grip is for sure on. Yeah, it's on the Sunday.
What have you done arm lifting?
Yeah, so grip sport and arm lifting is two names for basically the same things. There are some small differences, but I do everything. But that's on the Sunday of the Fit Expo. I'll be there, and you should definitely.
I'll come over. I think I just might do it though.
Yeah.
There you
It's a lot of fun, and there's really nothing really stressful. I mean, there's not much technique involved, and we can help you with technique for
But
whatever those
there is technique though.
there is
There is.
technique, but it's not like you're going into an arm wrestling tournament not knowing what you're doing, right? So
Yeah.
you can learn the technique very fast.
Yeah.
You might take a while to develop the specific strength, but and the way it's done, it's rising bar. So they start at a weight that everyone can lift, and then they just add 5 or 10 pounds at a time, and you keep going until you can't. So it's very simple, no stress.
Have you met that guy Ott? He's pretty famous for it.
Ode, yeah, no, many times.
Oh,
Been
did they say his name wrong? Ode? Oh,
yeah, they say Ode. It's written odd, but it's pronounced as Ode. Yeah, I've been to Russia with him. I've been to many of his contests. It's incredible what he's able to do. I think he's 70.
I know.
74, I think now.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
wow.
crazy.
Yeah, he came down here to San Diego. We had a couple of good contests over here. I did a
Okay.
couple.
Cool.
Not very many women though. There's just not very many women.
Okay.
But then there were some young people that the people who were there actually surprised me.
Okay. All right, good.
Yeah, that seemed like there was more interest.
Cool.
Yeah.
Where do you live?
San Diego.
Oh, you're in San Diego. Okay. You know, Southern California has quite a few strong grip competitors, and Will Giuliani is the name of the guy who's organizing the grip contest at the Expo.
He goes to my gym.
Okay, so he's a very excited guy. He's a very animated guy. He's gonna do a great job with this contest.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
How many world records do you have in grip?
It's hard to tell. So I don't have many. So a lot of people have world records, but they're usually weight class world records. So I have world records for my weight class. That's not necessarily the heaviest weight that anyone's lifted.
Gotcha.
Probably, I don't really keep track because I've won many over the years that were just eventually beaten. But
Sure.
I probably have 4 or 5. I'm not sure exactly.
Good.
My best events are anything with a big handle. So like
Okay.
an axle or a thick handle. That's my strength. So yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. Hey, welcome in Hollywood, Matt Conley. Double bicep pose just for you. And then shout out to everybody in the chat. I really appreciate y'all keeping the conversation going. Drew, Mike, Hannah, thank you. Even Andrew, hi. And then Tammy Stowe McClure said, "Come do grip in LA, Stephanie." You know Tammy?
So Tammy is the pound for pound strongest woman on the planet in grip.
Wow.
She is
okay. I'm ready to learn from her. I'm ready to teach me.
Yeah.
Hi, Tammy.
She lives.
Where does she?
She lives in Idaho.
Oh, I thought she was in LA.
She'll be in LA for the contest, but
okay.
Yeah, because you said you were going to the UAL.
She goes everywhere and wins everywhere. She's never not won. She's been competing for 3 years. She's never not won.
Wow.
Well, we'll see how much grip I have left after doing Iron Wars.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge. And I know you had a big day, so I don't want to keep you up too much later.
Yeah. No, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed this.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And we hope to see you around. She might see you in California.
Yeah.
I might pop up at the Ottawa Open. So we'll definitely stay in contact.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your week. Remember, on Tuesday, we are having the woman we talked about earlier, Danielle, and then Bethany and Michelle on to talk about their matches coming up in Canada. So that'll be really fun. So have a wonderful week. We'll see y'all on Tuesday.